Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier, and this is the second most frequently asked question on your source paper. How useful is a source? So let's see how you can maximise your marks. That is our aim after all. Now, you should bear in mind the provenance of a source, not just who wrote it, who published it, and when, all important things to consider though, but also think about what type of source it is. If it's a book, it might add to our knowledge and understanding of a topic. If it's a speech, a memoir, or a diary entry, it might also add to our knowledge and understanding. But it might also provide evidence of a particular perspective. If it's a cartoon, it might tell us something and again provide evidence about how people, or some people, might not represent everyone, reacted to something. And do bear in mind, a source can be useful and not so useful at the same time. For example, it could be useful as a piece of propaganda, useful in showing us why some people thought in a certain way, perhaps believing propaganda that wasn't in fact true. But it doesn't help us establish what was true. So, here's our question and our source, and it's a cartoon. Now I will stand by what I always say about your source paper. It is your friend. You can earn really good marks from your source paper. But just as you have to read sources carefully, you have to look at them carefully too. And I think this source is a very good example of that point. You also have to use your own knowledge, and you have to think of the big overall message in a source and any other things that the source is telling you. So let's unpick what I'm saying. First, study the source carefully, and you do that best by working inwards with a cartoon, and that includes its provenance. It's a British cartoon, written in May 1919. First piece of knowledge you can bring to that provenance is that the Treaty of Versailles was the first treaty to be decided, and the Germans accepted it at the end of June. Now you might not know that they were first shown its terms in May, though you do now, and actually it was May the 7th. But you should know that they were shown the terms and given time to present a response. We'll look at what the cartoon shows. Germany is coming out of the big Ford dental room. Wrapped around his mouth are the peace treaty terms, and there is a sign on the door that reads, "Call again in 15 days." Piece all that together and you are well on your way to very good marks, because it tells us about the shock Germany had when it received the terms of the treaty, and that it was not given long to respond. Look at the character. Now let's move to the gentlemen on the bench. Bulgaria, Turkey and Austria-Hungary. They all look pretty shocked too. Why? Because as the cartoon is titled, and as the waiting room sign suggests, it's their turn next, and they do look pretty worried. And all the time, this is in plain sight of you, and it makes the source useful. But we can say a lot more. And at this point, let me remind you that everything in a cartoon is deliberately drawn, which means there's a lot for you to use. There's also a sign on the wall saying "No gas used in this establishment." Now, to be fair, you might not be aware And actually, the cartoon as it was shown on the exam paper didn't tell you. But gas was used by dentists as an anaesthetic. This was when I was young. But what you should know is that Germany was not also blamed for starting the war, or not only blamed for starting the war, but also for how it fought the war. And Germany was the first to use lethal gas in the war. So, there can be two messages in that sign. You are guilty of using lethal gas first, and we're not using an anaesthetic, so you can expect painful terms. But how is that useful for us? Well, it shows there was little sympathy in Britain for Germany, and you can bring what you know to this too. The British lost almost 900 lives in World War I, around 1 million if you include the countries from its empire and its Commonwealth, with twice that number injured. Every family in Britain knew someone killed or injured in the war. So, this cartoon is very useful as evidence that the terms of the Treaty of Versailles were indeed harsh, and that the majority of the British people did not think they were too harsh, and that they didn't have any sympathy for Germany's allies either. And when those terms were known, Germany's allies were really worried about their own treaties. What's more, Germany and its allies were just going to have to suffer the consequences, the reference to gas not being used. While the same reference to gas gives us a hint as to why the British people felt so bad about Germany. Big message and sub-messages, and the mark scheme requires contextual knowledge if you're going to get up to 6 or 7 marks. And don't be shy about referring to impressions that are given, the tone of a source. The whole tone of this source gives us the impression that Germany and its allies deserve their punishment. There's no reason to feel sorry for them. And the examiner's report refers to better students identifying a gloating tone. And let me add the fact that the source is biased. It's blatantly biased, but that is immaterial. Now, I want to make one final point, and it's an important one. In a useful question, focus on finding its usefulness. There may be limitations, and if you see them, point them out, but emphasize the usefulness. The examiner's report makes this point. And the final point. Don't forget to answer the question. Explain why you find the source extremely useful, very useful, or mostly useful. The mark scheme requires this for full marks. Now, I will say this throughout this series on past Treaty of Versailles source questions. I have 18 past papers on the Treaty of Versailles and the Paris Peace Conference as a whole, plus their mark schemes, plus the examiner's reports. It's the kind of thing we can work on in tutorials if you think that might be useful for you. If you've been listening to my videos, you know the drill. Get your parents to contact me at historymadeeasier@gmail.com and we'll see if we can sort something out. But for now, let me thank you for listening and wish you the very best of luck in your studies. Cheers.